a 3-month campaign, and she was supposed to introduce herself to the American people. No wonder people were Googling, did Joe Biden drop out? And so...
No. No. You're saying 3 months wasn't long enough? It was too long.
It's almost surprising, but here we are. Some people still can't accept reality. Even after all this time, there are those who refuse to come to terms with Kamala Harris's defeat in last year's elections. They hold on as if the outcome never happened, clinging to denial instead of moving forward.
It's not like we don't know. In Britain, for instance, when you have a short election, it's not like you don't know who the leader of the party is for months and years before that.
But you're either the person who's Googling the day before, did Biden drop out, or you know in a week. You know, did anyone in this audience not know enough about Kamala Harris pretty much after a week?
It's been 8 long months since the election, yet unbelievably, some people are still pointing fingers everywhere except at Kamala Harris herself. Excuses keep piling up, but Bill Maher isn't buying any of it. In his view, Harris must carry her fair share of responsibility for that loss, and he didn't hesitate to say it out loud. When a few die-hard Democrats attempted to shield her on his show, he cut straight through their defense. As always, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications, because this story is just getting started.
Everything the candidates, especially the Democrats, do to get voters annoys them. The constant texting. Did you get the texts like from Tim Walz every 5 minutes, and like always begging for money and knocking on doors? We've got people knocking on doors. People don't want knocking on your door. Who in this day and age wants someone knocking on? Kids don't even like it when a phone call. That's like too much of a invasion of their privacy.
Bill Maher set the stage flawlessly, laying out one by one the reasons why voters found Kamala Harris so difficult to connect with. And truth be told, he wasn't exaggerating. Every single point rang true. Each trait on that list felt alienating, off-putting, almost as if her entire image had been crafted to push the average voter away. All the Democrats really needed to do was present a clear, consistent message and trust that the American people would respond. Sounds simple enough, right? But instead, they chose the complicated route. Rather than clarity, they spent their term twisting themselves into knots trying to appease the ever-demanding woke crowd. Predictably, that approach collapsed. And instead of correcting course with common sense, they doubled down, leaning on cheap gimmicks, guilt tactics, and old-fashioned voter manipulation. Why earn genuine support when you can try to manufacture it? Classic.
Trump hasn't done anything yet, but I understand the
This was the problem. You know, there was a 2014 study that showed that Fortune 500 companies were more likely to pick a female CEO if the company was struggling, basically setting women up for the big job, but to also fail. If they did well, fine. But if they failed, like, look, we have a female CEO while failing. And that's what I feel like they did to Kamala Harris. When Biden refused to step aside and not run again, he was supposed to be that bridge. He backed off on that promise due to arrogance. And then he drops out after a catastrophic debate performance, and they set Kamala Harris up to fail.
If you've been with this channel for any length of time, you already know, outrageous, over-the-top takes from the left are practically routine. But every now and then, one of those takes stands out so much, it deserves a trophy all on its own. And this was one of those moments. Sarah Isker actually tried to argue as if Kamala Harris had just been plucked off some random bench, dropped into the spotlight, and handed Joe Biden's role. As if the last 4 years, 4 long, highly public, and impossible-to-ignore years of serving as vice president, had simply never happened. The mental gymnastics required to spin that kind of narrative? Honestly, it's Olympic level. Yet, this is the kind of revisionist fairy tale the left has mastered, constantly rewriting reality to shield their own. But here's the cold truth. Kamala Harris had more than enough time, more than enough visibility, and more than enough opportunities to win over the American people. And spoiler alert, she didn't. Bill Maher, to his credit, wasn't about to let that delusion slide past unchallenged. Right there on his show, he called out Isker's fantasy, no filter, no fluff, no hesitation. At some point, someone has to deliver the hard truth. Voters didn't simply forget Kamala Harris. They saw her. They remembered her. And when the time came, they rejected her.
No. No. You're saying 3 months wasn't long enough? It was too long.
It was long enough.
It was long enough.
If they had
There's
a
a different-
primary,
Shit, it's not that they didn't have time to introduce. They met someone and they didn't like them.
if they had had a primary, they wouldn't have picked her. And if they had,
That's
she would have been
different.
able to
Yes.
rough out those edges that then she basically has to start from scratch with a campaign team she didn't hire that didn't like her, right? It was his team. And so I wonder if that next Democratic person, maybe
Well-
someone's not even on our radar yet. Because frankly, when you look at the history of who's there's two types. The one who waited in line, who was next in line, and then there's the one who comes out. That's Obama. That's Clinton. That's Reagan to some extent.
Sarah Isker is still holding tightly to that worn-out narrative that Kamala Harris was somehow set up to fail, painting her like a tragic political martyr. In her version of events, Democrats supposedly knew Joe Biden's campaign was sinking fast, and rather than let yet another old white man take the blame, they decided to sacrifice Harris by throwing her under the bus. Sounds noble in theory, right? But let's be honest, the only thing Harris was truly set up for was endless media protection, glowing coverage, and softball interviews. If anything, she had the smoothest, most protected political runway anyone could ask for. Out of all the leading Democrats at the time, Harris arguably had the strongest shot at defeating Trump. Her problem was never her background or identity. It was the party's obsession with turning every single issue into a woke talking point. Instead of empowering her, Democrats tied her hands with tone-deaf pandering that pushed voters further away. In the end, it wasn't sabotage that destroyed her chances. It was the message, or more accurately, the complete lack of one.
I'm going to side with Sarah about this one thing. If you're the sitting vice president for a president who has, throughout his entire term in office, been sitting at about somewhere between a 35 and 40% approval rating. People view the Biden administration as a failure. We can have a long discussion about whether they are right about that, about the economy, but the perceptions of the economy were that people thought inflation was too high, people thought we were on the wrong track, 75% wrong track numbers, and this huge inflation overhang. You're the sitting vice president, and you get put on elevated to the top of the ticket 107 days ahead of the election. I think that is a very high degree of difficulty put on anybody, and I do not think she is the perfect candidate. I tend to agree with Sarah that probably in a fully litigated primary, she probably would not have been the Democratic nominee, but we'll never know that.
And just when it seemed like the excuse factory had run out of new material, John Heilman jumped in to back up Sarah Isker, diving headfirst into full-blown damage control. This is the same guy who spent years chanting the Bidenomics is booming mantra like it was gospel. Yet suddenly, almost overnight, he's admitting the obvious, that the economy was a mess the whole time. Oh, now it's a problem. For years we were told by outlets like CNN and MSNBC that Biden had swooped in and saved the economy from the supposed ruins Trump left behind. Inflation was transitory, gas prices were manageable, and rising grocery bills were brushed off as nothing more than a vibe issue. But fast forward to today, and here's Heilman trying to spin a brand new narrative that Biden's dismal economic record somehow made it impossible for Kamala Harris to campaign effectively. Give me a break. That excuse doesn't hold water, and Bill Maher knew it. You could see it on his face. He was practically boiling with frustration as he listened to both Heilman and Isker twist themselves into knots, inventing excuse after excuse in a desperate attempt to cover up Harris's failure.
There's never been anybody who's had the difficulty of that situation, elevated that late in the campaign. Why?
Democrat would have needed to run away from
Bill,
the
I don't know
Biden
if you know this, but the vice president of the United States is basically
administration.
shoved in a broom closet for 3.5 years.
I know.
Like, you couldn't.
She was more popular in there.
Yes, well.
I mean, this idea that the idea in a mass media age that 107 days is not long enough to know somebody.
You are way overestimating the American people in terms of what their ability. No. You have someone like Donald Trump has become a universally known, understood, loved by some, hated by others over the course of being omnipresent for 8 years.
Decades.
Okay.
Barack Obama becomes president of the United States after running for 2 years as president, runs a 50-state primary, is on television, does dozens of Democratic debates.
Now hold on, Bill Maher is about to jump in, but before he does, let's clear something up. Kamala Harris wasn't shoved into some dark, forgotten corner of the White House, no matter how desperately her defenders want you to believe that narrative. The truth is, she was handed real responsibilities. Major ones. Take the border crisis, for example. That wasn't some symbolic title. It was a genuine assignment. And what did she do with it? She fumbled, badly. Under her so-called leadership, Millions of undocumented migrants streamed into the country while she smiled for cameras, offered empty platitudes, and avoided setting foot near the actual border for as long as she possibly could. And it doesn't stop there. Harris was also handed golden chances to connect with everyday Americans, like an invitation to sit down with Joe Rogan, one of the biggest platforms in the country. But instead of seizing the opportunity, she turned it down flat. Apparently, facing tough, unfiltered questions wasn't something she wanted on her to-do list. Even in the rare interviews she did accept, things didn't go any better. They turned into spectacles of rambling word salads, awkward laughter, and almost no substance. That wasn't a sidelined politician. That was someone in the spotlight, given the microphone, and squandering it every single time. And that, right there, is why Kamala Harris never managed to win over the public.
I don't know if you ever watched this show, but I had Michael Douglas on this week.
Yeah.
At the top, we were talking about this, and he made a very good point that every other country in the world can do it in months, sometimes weeks. Why can every other country do it in that short a period of time? Are they all that so much brighter than America? I don't think so.
Well,
Mostly parliamentary. I mean, there's like literal reasons, right? We don't have a parliamentary system.
I mean,
we also have a First Amendment. We don't make people campaign this whole time. The American people want to give them $20, and so they can afford it. I mean, small dollar donors are arguably the worst thing that's happened to our politics, as it turned out.
It's a small dollar donor didn't make $20 billion. No.
A lot of it.
Kamala Harris didn't start her run as an unpopular figure. In fact, she came out of the gate with plenty of momentum. She had the spotlight firmly on her, the media cheering her every move, and the powerful historic firsts narrative working in her favor. For a brief moment, it seemed like she had the makings of a political star. But here's where it all unraveled. Her party's obsession with woke culture smothered any real chance she had to connect with everyday Americans. The message Democrats pushed wasn't inspiring, it was exhausting. While ordinary families were trying to figure out how to afford gas for their cars or groceries for their tables, Harris and her allies were busy lecturing the country about pronouns, privilege, and identity politics. That's not leadership, that's alienation. And this is why voters never truly trusted her to lead the nation. Not because she's a woman. Not because she's a woman of color. But because she became the face of everything Americans were simply tired of: hollow slogans, empty speeches, and culture war theatrics. Meanwhile, Donald Trump, whether people loved him or couldn't stand him, was out there hammering on issues that cut straight to people's daily lives: a stronger economy, lower inflation, fewer distractions from cultural nonsense. He was blunt, he was direct, and for many struggling Americans, he felt like a safer bet than Harris's vague promises and nervous laughter. When it came time to choose, the decision wasn't complicated. For many voters, it wasn't even political. It was pure survival instinct.
You're either the person who's Googling the day before, did Biden drop out, or you know in a week. You know, did anyone in this audience not know enough about Kamala Harris pretty much after a week to make a decision? No. Yeah, you just people.
How are you going to enforce that?
We just get sicker of them.
What? So
how are you going to tell people they
say
can't
the
talk about politics?
What?
How with free speech that I know you love?
Yeah.
How are you going to limit people's ability to run for office?
I'm not limiting. We're not making a law.
Bill, are you?
Isn't there somehow
of
ability
course.
to reduce the amount of money involved
Get
in
rid
politics?
of super PACs by making it no limits, full disclosure. 24-hour disclosure.
We could
should
fix
have
democracy in a minute. Get rid of gerrymandering, get rid of money in politics, get rid of the Electoral College. No, none of that is. We're going to keep working with this constipated system that we live with.
Bill Maher made a sharp point, one that I think went right over some people's heads. In today's world of non-stop news cycles, endless viral clips, and bite-sized content, it doesn't take hours of speeches to understand who a political candidate really is. Sometimes all it takes is a single moment, a short clip, 60 seconds of clarity to reveal exactly what they stand for. That's where Trump had the advantage. Yes, he was already a celebrity, but that wasn't what propelled him into the White House. What did the heavy lifting was the message: "Make America Great Again." A simple slogan, direct and unshakable, that cut straight through the political noise. Whether you loved it or absolutely hated it, the phrase stuck. It resonated with millions because it was clear, memorable, and easy to rally behind. And most importantly, it worked. Now here's the uncomfortable question. Can anyone name a single, defining message from Kamala Harris? Just one slogan, one idea, powerful enough to rally the country or even leave a lasting impression? Didn't think so. Her campaign was built on style over substance, a mix of vague platitudes, meandering word salads, and that awkward, nervous laugh that became her trademark. That isn't vision. That isn't leadership. That's a void where direction should have been.
Your contention is that no people were late deciders in the election.
No, they were. I talked about them last week. Christmas Eve shoppers.
So those people apparently needed longer than 90 days.
They would have been undecided.
They always would have been.
Exactly. That's why I call them. I called them, John, I said this last week, I called them Christmas Eve shoppers. My father was one. People who don't buy their presents until the Christmas Eve night. He would go into the store, and he wouldn't feel like he could do it until he was fully in the spirit. You had to be in the store on Christmas Eve with Santa and all the fucking elves and everything that was going on.
By this point, John Heilman was clearly scrambling to save face. You could almost see the desperation as he tried, without even cracking a smile, to argue that undecided voters simply didn't have enough time. According to him, 3 months wasn't nearly long enough for people to make up their minds about Kamala Harris. Seriously? In today's world of TikTok soundbites, viral clips, and 24/7 political coverage, voters can size up a candidate in less than 30 seconds. They don't need months. They need a moment. Bill Maher wasn't buying that excuse for a second. He cut it down immediately, pointing out the obvious. America now has one of the longest election cycles on the planet. Campaigns stretch on endlessly, debates dominate headlines, and even with all that time, there are always undecided voters lingering right up until Election Day. So no, John, the problem wasn't a lack of time. The real issue was that Democrats refused to look in the mirror. Instead of owning up to Harris's weaknesses, they chose to spin, deflect, and blame the clock. And here's the harsh truth. Kamala Harris never gave voters a clear, compelling message. Nothing that stuck. Nothing that moved people. Certainly nothing strong enough to convince undecided Americans to say, yes, she's the one. At the end of the day, no amount of media spin, no political gymnastics, and no last-minute finger-pointing can hide the reality. Kamala Harris didn't connect. She wasn't sidelined. She was given the stage, the microphone, the spotlight, and she blew it. From her failure on the border crisis to her forgettable, uninspired messaging, voters saw right through the facade. And as Bill Maher made painfully clear, the endless list of excuses from Democrats isn't helping, it's embarrassing. Blaming the economy, blaming timing, blaming literally everything except the candidate herself is exactly why the party keeps losing touch with reality. Americans aren't asking for curated narratives. They're asking for competence, for clarity, for leadership. And Harris delivered none of those things. That's the story. No more spin. No more denial. Just cold, hard truth. And on that note, we close the curtain on today's video. If you're tired of the media coddling politicians and dressing up failure as historic, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Here, we cut through the noise and call it exactly as it is. No fluff, no filters. Join the conversation, and let's keep holding power to account. Until next time.